Here we go now.
Good evening. Welcome back to the Lynn Show. And thank you for joining us here I'm in New York City, and we've got guests tonight from Philadelphia and from Israel, and it's going to be a really amazing and important show. Tonight's topic is resilience, which we know we need a lot of these days. We had a program here last night, and yes, socially distanced, and everyone wore masks. It was we're very careful here. It was beautiful to see people, but I got the same overwhelming message from everybody, the young professionals in New York City, and it's like, you know, we're going to go through a lockdown again. We got to do this again. Like, how do we do it? And really, people are coming apart at the seams. We all are in our way and in our own ways at different levels of life and stages. And this is the real deal. Like, the psychologists are busy right now. The therapists are busy. Social workers are really busy. Teachers are busy. Everyone's busy trying to figure out, how do you actually survive more lockdown? What are the consequences of this? And the trait we need, of course, is resilience. We need to be able to get through this well and come out, not just having survived on the other side, but actually come out better on the other side. If you can imagine such a thing. You know, in Judaism, we are very versed in the concept of trials or ordeals. In fact, we've been learning in the Torah portions since Rosh Hashanah. When we started after Rosh Hashanah, we started after Sukkot with the beginning of the Torah again, and the stories of Abraham and Abraham's famous episode, so to speak, were 10 trials that the Almighty sent him. And these 10 trials tested him in every single way that he could. And each test raised him up a level. No different like going to the gym. You work on different areas at the gym. You come up against resistance and you create muscle. So there's spiritual muscle also. There's developmental muscle. That's where we want to go. You know, we see ordeal as opportunity. As Jews, that's what we have to see it. We have to see it as opportunity. We have to get the message clear. Like, why am I struggling with this? What can I be on the other side of this? But that trait that's going to get us through is resilience. A very cute thing, you know, they closed the schools now for the next couple of weeks in Philadelphia. And so they decided to keep the nursery and the preschool open because those kids are really safe, and they cannot handle Zoom. And kindergarten was considered to be an older group, and so they canceled kindergarten. I have a kindergartner. I don't know if I have a clip here that will work, but I have a kindergartner. And when he found that the school was canceled, he just went, into conniption. I don't know if it works, Dave, our producer over there. If you bring it up. But he went to conniption. It's a really cute thing. Don't play the whole thing, just a couple seconds. If you have it, put it up there. Yeah. Okay. Like crying, unconsolable. He misses the playground. All he wants to do is have his friends and his teachers. Oh, Gabby. Oh, you can't get the sound. It's so sweet. Anyway, okay, fine. And he davened. He prayed. And he's like, okay, just pray. He's asking God, please open school back up. And guess what? My wife and I woke up this morning to an email from the school that they decided that they would relent on kindergarten. Kindergartens can come back in. So he was like, no problem, Mom, Dad. Like, I got this covered, okay? I took care of it. But like the pain that the cry, we're all feeling that same thing. Okay, so let's talk about tonight. We have two amazing guests, two of my favorite people in the world. Our second guest will be my brother, Dr. Rabbi Joseph Lin from Jerusalem. And we've had him before. We did a series this summer on positive psychology and Judaism. And you can reference that in a link somewhere there. I'm sure our producer can get it up on the screen. But we had a great series, 5-part series this summer. We're bringing him back tonight to talk about the psychology and the practical advice for building resilience in these times. And we'll see him in a moment. But our first guest is another one of my favorite people in the world, Mr. Emil Fish. And it turns out this is a man who spent most of his adult life in Los Angeles, but I happen to have got the great fortune of getting to know him recently, the last couple of years. And it turns out he lives around the corner from me. Who would have known such a thing? So we've been able to grow a relationship together and lots of amazing conversations and projects and ideas. And it's a great pleasure to welcome him to the show. And he knows, he comes from a time in Jewish history where the trait of resilience was on tap, challenged, and on display. a Holocaust survivor, and a person who has built for himself his business empire, family, a vision given to the Jewish people, built institutions, is tirelessly committed to growing more and building more and doing more. And don't think that that doesn't come from the experiences he and his family went through in the Holocaust, and doesn't come from that trait of resilience, even though he'll never admit it. But it's my pleasure to welcome Mr. Emil Fish to the show, live from Philadelphia. Hello, Mr. Fish. Welcome.
Oh, hi. First of all, Rabbi Lynn, I want to thank you for the introduction. And the only wish I had is that my mother, Aliyah Shalom, would have been alive and heard it. She would have believed every word you said. I'm not so sure that I believe everything you said, but thank you anyway.
A Yiddish mama will believe anything about her kid.
Right. You know exactly what I mean. Okay, so...
Great. Well, let's have a little introduction here. You know, you have a long life into 120. It should continue to grow and be blessed and healthy. But I just give us our audience here a little background of your childhood and your journey through the Holocaust. Where were you born? Where did you grow up? And of course, the Holocaust hit at a young age. And what was your experience surviving with the family that did survive through the Holocaust?
Okay, I was born in 35 in a little town, eastern Slovakia, was made up of 10,000 people. About 3,000 people were Jews, mostly Orthodox, but not all of them. And I went to Cheder, the normal stuff that Jewish Hasidim do. And in 42, 90% of the 3,000 Jews were taken to concentration camp and killed, and about 10% were left in town. Luckily, my father was a businessman, successful, and he was able to get exemption, and we survived till 44 when Hitler, the Germans occupied Slovakia, and they took the rest of the 10% Jews to concentration camp, and I ended up in Bergen-Belsen in 1944. And thanks God, my mother and I, and my sister and I were in Bergen-Belsen, and we survived, and my father was taken to Buchenwald, and he also survived, thank God. And then we came back to Slovakia in 1945. We lived there. I lived there till 49. I went to Israel to Yeshiva, Bnei Akiva, for 2.5 years. Then I joined my parents and my sister in Canada. And in 55, we moved to Los Angeles, where I got an engineering degree, became a developer, and got immediately involved in Jewish institutional life, in shuls, schools, federation, and so on and so on. Eventually, in 2005, I went to see my hometown. I was not happy what I saw. I saw buildings not in ruin, but they were there. And I committed myself to get involved in Holocaust education and heritage of my town. And that's what I've been doing since 2005. That's the summary.
I want everyone to know here, this is how I met Mr. Fish, because we went to this town, Bardiov, because there was this crazy guy who was going to pay for us to go to Bardiov. And like, no one goes to Slovakia. It's not exactly on the map of Holocaust tours, you know? And so we went, okay, so this crazy guy is paying us for us to go to Slovakia. And we were blown away by what we saw. It was phenomenal and incredible. And since then, we've become close friends, I would like to say, if I could have that friendship, if you'd honor me with that. And the story of this town of Bardiov and the story of Slovakian Jewry is powerful. And we're going to do what we can to make sure that everyone in the world knows about it. Okay, we're working on great stuff. And if you want to go to Bardiov with us this summer when the vaccine hits, we're going to go. Okay, we're going back. Now, you were a young boy, right? You were 10 years old when you were liberated from Bergen-Belsen, and you do have an amazing, phenomenal memory. But, you spend your life in the Holocaust story and family and everyone in your community. Maybe you can give us, what would you say is the most powerful trait that allowed Jews to stay strong during the Holocaust or post-Holocaust, to avoid despair, to be able to rebuild their lives and build it so beautifully like yourself? What is that trait that is there that the Jewish people demonstrated?
I think what I learned from my father and the Holocaust people around me is the strongest thing that you can have is faith that better days are coming. And that's what kept I think most of the Holocaust survivors going. And there were two reasons that kept them going. One of them was faith in Hashem that I knew. And the other one, it was faith that America joined the Second World War and eventually the war is going to end. So you had to have these two faiths balanced. You know better days are coming, and you have to take every day as it comes and do the best you can and believe that eventually you're going to see your family again. And that was the number one.
You have to have a vision of what to hold on to.
Right. And then you have to live from day to day.
Primo Levi says, he wrote in his book, Survival in Auschwitz, that the difference between life and death was if you woke up in the morning and pretended to brush your teeth and wash your face. You pretended to be normal. Like you had to have, like, even you had to go through the motions. And people who didn't, who stopped even in the smallest way, looking after their hygiene and pretending, they ended up calling a Musliman, which is like a Muslim, because they would just fall down and they, like a Muslim prays on the ground. These people were prostrated because they didn't have the energy to go forward. What would you do you have something? I mean, your father obviously survived Buchenwald also, and your family. Is there any personal experience in your family or story in your family that you turn to that has a remarkable display of this hope, of this resilience?
I have one story that I like to tell. One of the things that you have to have is you have to think on your feet all the time, and you have to say exactly like Lynn said, you have to pretend what you're not to survive. And you have to take every day as it comes because you don't know what tomorrow is going to bring, and you got to think. So one of the most famous stories that I have is one that where we were trying to hide in Bratislava, and we took a train, and we ended up at about 7 o'clock in the morning coming to Bratislava on Aryan papers, non-Jewish papers. We were dressed nicely. We were trying to hide there were no Jews. And my parents, we were all hungry. And my father decided we'll go to a coffee shop to eat. And the coffee shop was a pretty nice coffee shop, but all the tables were taken. And my father went to Breuer's Yeshiva in the Frankfurt on the Main and learned to speak perfect German there as a teenager. And we opened the door, and the only table was empty, and a German officer, by that time Slovakia was occupied by Germany, and a German officer was sitting, the only one there. And we opened the door, and he's right there at the front door, and my father tells us, in Yiddish, do not talk. So we sit down, and the first thing my father does, he stands up and says, "Hi, Hitler." The officer answers him, "Hi, Hitler." My father sits down, the waitress comes, and my father says to this German officer, dressed as an officer in uniform, he says, "You know, I don't like what you Germans are doing to Slovakia. I don't like it. We are your partners, and you guys, Hitler should know that to trust us. And all I see now, this was in 1944, is German officers. We're not supposed to be occupied. That's not the deal we have. The deal we have is that you're supposed to trust us. And all I see is officers. The German officer looks at him and tells him, you know, it's not exactly like this. And my father says, well, it is exactly like this. Look at yourself. You're a German officer. I want to sit with the Slovakian officer. The German officer got very angry at my father, got up, put his hand up, says, "Hi, Hitler." My father gets up, says, "Hi, Hitler." And the officer left. Now,
I don't think anyone watching this could ever imagine having the goal, the courage to do such a thing. I mean,
right. Well,
the movie.
Trying to be resilient, you have to change what reality is in order to survive. And you have to be confident and do things which are unusual. But you take 1 minute at a time because you don't know what's coming up. Anyway, we had our breakfast and we left.
I mean, my final question for you really is like, it's a different type of struggle. Obviously, it's not the Holocaust, but people today, everyone's struggles are personal for them, and I see with my own eyes. My wife's a therapist. I'm a rabbi. People really are coming apart at the seams, and people are scared, and they're watching their lives fall apart. Their social networks, their interactions, their jobs, the visions that they had. You're talking about, young Jews here in New York. Like, everyone's got their plans. I mean, we make plans. We know we're going to be, for the rest of our lives. But then we're 18, and like those things are there's a question mark, and their norm is destroyed, and people are really coming apart, and it's very hard. So my question to you, Mr. Fish, is like, what advice can you give young Jews, anyone today, but okay, our clientele, young Jews in New York? Okay, we're hitting another lockdown, a dark winter, difficult times ahead. Like, what's the advice you gave some advice already? What's the advice you can give them and the inspiration you can give them?
I don't know if I can give inspiration. I leave it up to the rabbis, but I can give you reality. And the reality is, the first thing, you can't give up. That's the number one thing. And you have to take every day as it comes and do the best, because you know that a vaccine is coming. You know that in Second World War, most of the Jews knew that the war is going to end. They just didn't know when. So the object is, you need to find support to each other, family. In concentration camp, it was very important to friends who support each other, because sometimes one helped the other one. And you have to adjust to the situation. That's the hardest part. What I mean to adjust the situation, for example, it doesn't do you any good to talk back to a German officer, because they're going to shoot you. So you have to adjust to what the reality is. And you have to have faith that the better days are coming, and you have to be flexible, and you have to hope and pray and live day by day in the hope that it's going to end. I don't know what else I can tell you.
That's it, Mr. Fish. I'm gonna, if I could, I would give everyone your home phone number and address. So they could call you every day for that message. It's. I wish I could spend more time. We'll have more opportunities when we get going on the Bardiev project and bringing the story of the Jews of Bardiev to the world. And hopefully we'll be able to get you in front of our community much more often and in person, God willing. We should do that. I'm very grateful for you joining me on the show. Really, it's so great for me to get to introduce you to my friends, to my community. It really is a privilege and an honor. And like I said, God willing, we should do it in person together very soon.
Okay,
Thank
so
you very much for joining.
I appreciate your friendship. I really do. And thank you very much for having me. And hopefully, if you can make it to Bardiev, and I'll try to make it with you.
Amazing. Okay, Mr. Fish. God bless. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Great. Amazing man with amazing wisdom. Okay. And we will get to hear more from him, I promise. Okay. There's a lot of great stuff that's happening. He's building and building and building and building. And he's not giving up and not letting go. And Holocaust education is key. And COVID's not going to stop it. Okay. He's planning and planning, and I'm with him. And it's a beautiful thing to see. Very inspiring. It's a pleasure to bring on our second guest, my brother, Rabbi Dr. Joseph Lin. Tonight we'll flip it around to be Dr. Rabbi. We're going to use the doctor part, I think, first. Hey, how you doing over there in Jerusalem?
Nice to see you, Shmuley.
Yeah, early in the morning for you. Thank you for waiting to do this for us. Okay, very grateful. And okay, let's.
It's worth it just to see Mr. Fish speak.
It
is amazing to see a human being like that.
We really should, like for COVID, we should have just, a friend of mine in Tel Aviv has a program called Adopt a Savta, which is you get a Holocaust survivor, you adopt them, so to speak, and you want to know, when Trump won the election, they brought therapy dogs to the University of Pennsylvania, because people couldn't handle it. I think for COVID, if you're a Jew, you just need a Holocaust survivor to be able to speak to, and not just puts it in perspective, but I mean, to give you perspective and to give you that chizuk, to give you that strength, inspiration.
Unbelievable.
So okay, you have your doctorate in your master's in positive psychology and a doctorate in industrial psychology. Am I right? Organizational psychology. Great.
Same thing.
Right. So resilience is huge. In positive psychology, it's used in the military training. It's like this thing called resilience. Let's focus in on that. Why is that, before COVID, why is that a popular trait today? How is that being used?
So I'll tell you this. the basic understanding is that there's a huge problem that's developing in the world that we've been seeing. Positive psychology has really been following it in a huge way. That what's happening is that people have more and more access to so many opportunities and so many things, but yet rates of well-being are dropping drastically. Okay, from 1960 to kind of the boom of positive psychology in the year 2000, okay, they saw the rates of depression go up times 10. Okay, they saw the initial onset of when someone kind of deals with their first bout of depression. It used to be around about 30 years old.
Right.
And then from 1960 to 2000, the initial onset happened when? At about 15-ish.
Crazy.
So what's happening is that people have access to so much. We're supposed to be happy because we have so much freedom, but you see that well-being is falling apart. And the question really came about, which is, are there things we can do proactively to allow people to have better tools of how they can deal with life, of how they can have more happiness, of how they can get through difficult times? And what the whole field of resilience has become so popular is really about, what can I proactively do to give myself certain skills so when life gets difficult, I can not just get through it, but I can thrive afterwards. And that's really probably one of the main things that positive psychology has been focusing on, and putting all of these resilience programs in different fields, across numerous careers and educational systems, you name it. And it's quite awesome to see.
So how do you see it? Like, the word resilience, be resilient. Okay. But as anything, if you're an expert, you have a working definition that's obviously much more nuanced and thought.
Right.
What, like in the scientific world, what is resilience? How would you couch it? What is that?
So it's people would say, there are three things basically. Number one, a person is elastic, able to bounce back. Okay.
That's what Mr. Fish said. You have to think on your feet.
Right. Number two is people can recover quickly. That's a sign of someone being resilient. Okay. And number three is that even in dark times, people can focus on something positive. Those are probably three ways how to look at how to actually define resilience. Now, there are books and obviously articles that speak about it, but that's kind of the definitions. There's some of the definitions that people deal with when we're talking about doing this. But again, the real question comes down to is that, and this is something which is so important, is that resilience is something that can be implemented into your life. It's something that can be learned. It's not just, do you have it or not?
Okay, so we're gonna get into that in a sec. But just before, just give me the lay of the land. What is positive psychology as a science and an art form? What is it actually doing about it? What are the logistical investments that the world of positive psychology is making in society today? And then we'll get to the actual practical part.
I'll give you two examples which are awesome. Okay, which are awesome. Number one is there is tons of work happening in the military. You watch all those movies, Full Metal Jacket and Platoon, of, boot camp of people being yelled at and screamed at. But what they started seeing in the military is that
you want that officer and a gentleman. That's the one to go to.
Oh, there you go. But what they started seeing is that with all the military is that people post-combat, their lives were falling apart. Rates of depression were going up. Drug addictions, suicide rates, you name it. So they started to say, well, maybe there's something we can do in training that's a little bit different, that we can give people tools that post-combat, their life can actually get better. And there's a whole program out there. And if it's awesome, it really started at University of Pennsylvania. And for a period of time at the University of Pennsylvania, you would see just different units from the Army coming in to now go through something called resilience training.
I thought they were about the fraternity and sorority parties.
No, and these were officers coming in to learn skills of what they could teach their units. That what they decided was maybe we can do certain things during military training that's not just about your physical combat, but maybe we can learn certain skills about optimism, meaning, using your strengths, you name it. And it's called Master Resilience Training. You can see the website. You can see tons of articles, videos about it.
Yeah.
And they implemented this program, and the results they saw afterwards, as far as what people's lives, soldiers' lives, look like now post-combat, it was amazing to see. And it's still being done, and it's an awesome program. That's kind of one place where
I don't know why you don't put that out for everyone. Make a seminar, charge some money, you make a good living. But Biden said it's going to be a dark winter, so let's put out a master resilience training course. Is it out there? Do you know one that's out there for laymen?
It's not that I know, but you got to check it out. Shmuley, it's amazing, to see some of these things they're doing in the military. Again, this is pre-combat. It's awesome. The other place where it's like alive and amazing, and as a father, you can relate to this, is the world of resilience training with children. We send our kids to school. They learn all of the academic things they need, hopefully, if they go to school. But the question is, are there things you can teach kids that can help them deal with the difficulties of life? What if there's a class in school? What if there's a program in the school you sent your child to where they would learn, here's how you can deal with stress. Here's how you can deal with tragedy. Here's how you deal when you are overwhelmed. And kids learn these tools of resilience. So what they found in just some of the research, they found that when they did this program in various schools, I'll keep it general, they found that besides the kids having lower rates of anxiety and depression, their well-being went up, and their academic reports, also higher SAT scores. It's like amazing to see.
I do remember one of the first, it won't be a surprise for many people watching this, if they met me before, but our story as brothers, we are brothers. That's why we have the same last name. We're brothers. And we were not raised religious at all. We both really found it in our lives. Later at a later stage. Oh no, not a picture. Oh gosh. Okay. That's we didn't look like that before. That's an after picture. Don't show a before picture. Producers back there, or you're fired. Okay. So anyway, but one of the first exposures I actually had to, let's call it a religious Jewish community, or where Torah study or Bible study is obviously a prime part of day-to-day life and education. I went into an institution that I was brought there for a class, and there was a very old rabbi there. And he was sitting with a whole table full of like 10, 11, 12-year-old boys. And he was like, it was like the Zayda, the grandpa, like they were so cute. Like, when do you have such an old man? And the boys were there like, it's like 8 o'clock at night. They were there on their own. And they wanted to be there. And he was teaching them a story of Cain and Abel, and he's teaching a story about fratricide, about jealousy, about disappointment, about selfishness, about violence. He's teaching these kids regular stories that they're going to go through every year. They're going to come around to Cain and Abel and get a deeper insight into the realities of life. Like, I felt like a basic Jewish life and education actually prepares you for these things by virtue of the fact that they're normal. We don't expect life to be Club Med and a lazy boy chair and a cruise. It's supposed to be a life full of challenge, full of the realities that life throws us. The big stuff is hard to deal with, of course. But I remember that being very profound. I'm looking back like, no one does that in my world, right? Let me ask you this. Let's get practical. Like, okay, practical tools. It's been the last couple of minutes over here. Practical tools. We got a world that's falling apart out there. People are falling apart. I just saw an article that suicide rates are times 10 also now, which is terrible. My wife is teaching is a therapist in a certain school, and the kids are coming to her and being sent to her, and like real need for real intervention in a major scale right now. Okay, give us some tools, Doc. What would you recommend? Like, give us a prescription. What people can do.
So let's go through a few, okay? So I'll tell you, if you look at the world of resilience training, okay, and there's so many books out there and so many things you can watch, it's like it's there. It's content you can grab a hold of. Number one is what they speak about is the world of meaning. That what is clear as far as the research is concerned is those people who have meaning in their lives, their levels of resilience are totally different. In the field of positive psychology, they talk about how you define what does it mean, a meaningful life. A meaningful life is what is being connected to something outside of yourself. And the bigger that thing is, the more meaning you have, and therefore the more happiness you have. And meaning is a huge thing. You speak of Holocaust survivors, in the world of Viktor Frankl, logotherapy is all about the way people got through experiences in these camps was having meaning in their life. And it's a huge thing. And when people really focus on that, it's awesome. And I've seen very clearly that during this difficult time right now, a possible lockdown again in America, that people who have tried to make the experience meaningful, and I'll give you something more practical. When you try and focus on helping someone else through the experience, you speak about Holocaust survivors, Shmuley. You and I both know, someone like Emil Fish he's a warrior.
Right.
But the amount of Holocaust survivors out there right now that are scared, that are nervous. I just spoke to someone recently, a survivor, and he said to me, it used to be I could see my enemy. I can't see it now.
Right. That's it. Yeah.
The amount of survivors that are out there that can't fend for themselves, that are nervous about what's happening, that are scared. You take someone during this upcoming lockdown or during these winter months, and you find a survivor in your local neighborhood, and you make it your mission to make that person's life better. Number one, you'll have more meaning in your life. Number two, you're doing something very important. And number three, the biggest beneficiary will be you.
Right.
And meaning is a huge thing. And it's so important. There are great books to read. And this is something that people think about even more, is that where you see the biggest craving of meaning in today's world is in our professional life. And maybe there are some tweaks that people can make. And maybe now is a time where it's worth looking at things to see how could I make my professional life a little bit more meaningful.
Right. Good. And I'll add just one more thing to that. People, it's a good time to pick a charity that you care about or something like that and fundraise for it and get the word out there. Like, find something meaningful that you can do before. This is like, okay, the storm's coming. Great. You put your storm shutters on your windows at home before the blizzard hits. Like, storm's coming. COVID storm is coming. Again, round two, let's call it, and be armed and ready with good deeds and caring for someone else. Beautiful. Joseph, we have Bianca's going to come on. She takes some questions from the field. Okay. So, hey there, Bianca.
Hi, Rabbi Lynn and Rabbi Lynn. How's it going?
Hello, Bianca. How are you?
Good.
Okay.
Thank God. It's good to see you. It makes me feel
Nice to see
closer
you.
to home. I can't fly, but this is as close as I can get. How's it going?
Amazing.
Okay,
Well,
what you
I
got,
have two
Bianca?
questions for you. I have
Yes.
two questions for you. They're actually, I thought they were brilliant, so I really have someone
Uh-oh.
say them. So the first one is, there's this saying that, of course, you will know, but I'll just say it for everyone to know. It's "Sheva pa'amim nafal tzadik v'kam," like 7 times a righteous man will fall and then get up. So the question that someone submitted was, how does one know when to stop getting up? Like, how does one decide when it's time to move on when they're stuck in a situation that isn't helping them or serving them?
Mm-hmm. So I would tell you like this. I think that question comes actually before you start trying to achieve something. A lot of people spend a lot of time going after things that they maybe shouldn't go after. And the initial question we ask yourself is, say, is this the right goal for me to have? Is this the right place I should be pushing my life towards? And when you can really ask yourself that question as far as, okay, should I keep doing this or not? Well, when a person really knows this direction I should be going in, you'll often find that the answer is, unless there's some crazy reason to kind of give up, I'm going to keep going. The problem is when people are unsure if they should be going in this direction, then what you'll find is that, probably at a certain point when you don't see things going a certain way, then you're right. It's probably not the right way for you to go. But you know what? You probably shouldn't have gone down that path to begin with. That's why it's so important that before we put our efforts in certain directions, it's important to make sure that it's the right direction for us to be going in. I deal with a lot of people as far as trying to figure out how to choose the right career in life. And what I base all of my work off of is people figuring out what their natural strengths and then choosing a career accordingly. What happens when you do that is now the person knows very clearly, based off of a lot of data, this is the way I should be going. And when they have that clarity, even if they hit one wall, 2 walls, an endless amount, they're going to keep going, and they should keep going because you know what? They're on the right track.
Right.
But when people go down the wrong,
It sounds like the idea is here, like, really do the research and the deep dive into yourself. Is this the right track? In which case, then you hit a wall, but you can push through all those. and really hitting a wall otherwise should say, hey, did I really check it out well enough to know what I'm doing? In which case, if I didn't, and I'm honestly assessing why I'm doing what I'm doing and I'm hitting these walls, if it's really maybe not the right thing, either it's a sign from up there or it's just not the right fit for me and I keep hitting these walls, then you have to have the courage to know when to fold them, to cut your losses.
Well, I'm going to push back on that a little bit because, for example, I'm going to take liberty. I'm sorry. For example, like if someone's married and they're trying to decide like if they should push through, I feel like that's like a very extreme example, because when you get married, of course you assume like this is going to be for the rest of my life. This is the best decision I've ever made. But people still get divorced. So when is that point when a person can decide, wait, I know that initially and at its essence it was good.
Wait, you want a whole nother show. This is a whole nother show.
Okay, then I guess you're coming back.
When do you decide to get divorced? This is like
That's a huge question.
You could just put my brother's number, my wife's number, my number, whatever it is. Just put like psychology, a marriage
911. I think Bianca, I think it's quite similar. That if I know this is a really healthy relationship, I made the right healthy choice to marry this person. So at that point, I can say, okay, when we hit difficulties, let's keep going. Listen, anything in life that's important is going to take a lot of hard work, and there are going to be bumps along the road. But what you're going to see a lot of times with couples is that if maybe we didn't make the right choice here, or we got married for all the wrong reasons, people are not going to be able to push through difficult times. And you know what? They probably shouldn't push through as well. So
I would say that usually what my wife and I deal with sometimes is people who got married in ways that they didn't feel was when they get older, more mature. Hey, those weren't such great decisions back then. But can we actually reset now? And instead of working on trying to build on the shaky ground and the faulty foundation, you got to be able to go back and lay new foundation stone. And that's sometimes hard because you have to undo the past. You have to, but sometimes with kids and marriage and everything, it's definitely, I mean, it's always definitely worth the effort. But the undoing part is like a psychological, shift that's sometimes too much for people to get over.
So I'm glad you said the undoing. Oh, I'm sorry. Please, Riley.
I'm pushing back on your question. That what I feel is more important for people to focus on. I think the question is a great question, but I think you have to think about more is before you're going to invest so much time and energy into anything, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a career, whether it's anything, the more you have to focus really in the beginning. Is this healthy? Is this the right way for me to go? Am I using my strengths? Is this a right match? Right. People have to put more effort into really making sure they're placing their efforts in the right way. And I think that when you do that, you're going to be able to be way more resilient to push through all of the hard times, all of the bumps, etc., because this is the right thing to do.
Now it's my job just to take care of the time here. So this is a good question, and we put some good time into it. Bianca, I know you have.
I'll segue into the second, right?
Let's ask the second question, Rabbi Lynn. If you could just give it a brief answer, so we can close out the show, it'd be great.
Great.
Okay, and then hopefully we'll get more answers. I'll tap into this again. Okay, so the second question that I had was actually what Rabbi Shmuel Lin mentioned, which is relaying the foundation. So the question was, I will tell you exactly what it was. So when someone's going through trauma, how does someone archive their past experiences in a way that's helpful? So if you go through a very traumatic experience that kind of like defies your sense of self, how do you deal with that in your mind and put it in the past to be able to move on in a constructive way?
So I'll give you a very brief answer, is that before you can move on from trauma, you have to make sure you process the trauma in the right way. And that's where a lot of professional help can really come in. And when people try and move beyond trauma without dealing with it properly, then it creates a lot of issues in the future. Most important thing when a person has trauma is we have to initially sit with that trauma. How is it impacting our life? How do we feel about it? Where are my levels of well-being? What's the pain, etc.? And that you have to sit with that before the person can say, okay, now let me go forward. When people are able to really push on past trauma, and you can, in a healthy way, and their life gets much better after trauma, if they don't do things properly within the trauma itself, it's an issue. And I'll just say one example, which is that when a person mourns, when a person loses someone, so the Torah goes out of its way to say you have to sit down for a week of Shiva, 30 more, the whole month has to be very calm, and you have to still be in somewhat of a mourning period, and the whole year you can't forget about it, because in order for me to move on beyond this, I have to sit with it for a period of time and really work through it before I can now make my life that much stronger and better.
Yeah, I mean the Shiva process. I was thinking the exact same thing. Yeah, and being married to a therapist myself and therapists in the family, for sure the skills that therapists have today in helping to compartmentalize and deal with those type of trauma, trauma in life, is definitely the way to go. To pass up on that science and that tool belt would be a real shame. Bianca, thank you for
Thank you for having me. It was really interesting. Thank you, Rabbi.
And
We'll speak soon. Thank you.
To a good level. Thank you. Okay, Rabbi Dr. Joseph Lin, go back to bed. Thank you very much.
Oh, great seeing you.
Okay, always a pleasure. And I just want to thank everyone for joining us. And please know that next week is because of Thanksgiving. We're not having a Lynn show. Maybe I'll just go live and eat my turkey, if I have a turkey, if we can get a turkey, But we'll be back in 2 weeks, okay? And I'm looking forward to seeing you. Thank you for joining and for watching. And please click and share and like and whatever it is that goes on around me on the screen that you're watching, okay? And we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you very much. Good night.
Here we go now.